Okay, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight for the public art and its antinomies, a conversation on the nature and purpose of public art and the role of community engagement in its development. My name is Furen Dai. I'm the program and research assistant here at Asia Art Archive in America. For those of you who are new to us, AA in A is a Brooklyn-based nonprofit and a smaller satellite sibling of the Hong Kong-based organization, Asia Art Archive. AAA's mission is to preserve, to collect, and make information on contemporary art of Asia and from Asia more accessible in order to promote further research and understanding in the field. AAA in A maintains a collection of reference material in our Brooklyn reading room available to the public, and we are open 5 days a week. We also host a monthly series of programs like artist talk, screenings, and workshops, and then panel conversations like tonight. So these events usually take place on site, but since the start of the pandemic, we were shifted to a virtual format. And this also allowed us to host many amazing artists from across the globe. So for tonight's conversation, we will feature the artist Steve Locke, who is joining us from New York, and Wong Shu, who is calling in from Beijing, and on a Wednesday morning, his local time. So both artists will be presenting on their past public art proposals and also some of their more recent works that has reflected on their personal experiences with this approval process. So in the role of moderator tonight will be artist Ken Lum, and who is also the co-founder of Monument Lab, a public art and history studio that works on the exploratory approaches to public engagement and collective memory. So before I introduce each of the speakers more fully, I just want to share a few housekeeping notes. The schedule for the tonight, so we will start by first hearing two short presentations, first by Steve and then by Xu, and followed by these two presentations will be a discussion with Ken Lum about the broader issues that raised by their experiences. And finally, we will open this discussion to our audiences. So please feel free to submit your questions throughout this whole conversation. And you can do so by write your questions through Q&A box in the bottom of your screen. And now I'm just gonna give a bit more background on each of the speakers. Steve Locke is a New York-based artist raised in Detroit, Michigan. He has had residencies with the City of Boston and Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, and has received grants from Pollock Kressner Foundation and Louis Comfort Tiffany Foundation. He has had solo exhibitions at the Institute of Contemporary Art Boston and the Museum of Contemporary Art Detroit. He is currently a professor at the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York. Wong Shu is a Beijing and New York-based artist who works predominantly in sculpture and video installation. Wong's exhibition include Overtime Gift at 47 Canal, Garden of Seasons at the Vincent Price Art Museum, Shanghai Project at the Shanghai Himalaya Museum, and Under Foundations at the Sculpture Center. He has a BFA from CAFA and an MFA from Columbia University. Ken Lum is the chair of fine arts at the University of Pennsylvania School of Design. He was the co-founder and founding editor of Yishu, Journal of Contemporary Chinese Art. In 2012, Ken founded Monument Lab with Paul Faber, based in Philadelphia. Monument Lab cultivates and facilitates critical conversations around the past, present, and future of monuments. So for all of our speakers, the full bios are available on our website. And I'm extremely excited for tonight's conversation. So now without further ado, I would like to turn the screen over to Steve to start sharing his presentations. And thank you so much for joining us again tonight. And we look forward to hear about your questions at the end. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you so much, Farin. Thank you to Asia Art Archive in America for inviting me. And thank you for putting me in such wonderful company as you and Ken. I'm fans of both of their work. I am here in Brooklyn, and I have to say, I love when people introduce me as a New York-based artist. It's a new thing for me, but I never get tired of hearing that. So I want to talk with you about this project. Everyone can see the first slide here is a James Baldwin quote. Everyone can see that, I hope. If not, I'm sure someone will let me know. This is sort of the organizing principle that I think about for my public art process. And it came to me from this experience of working on this project when I was a Boston artist in residence. This project that I'm going to talk about is a proposed monument. So it's a little bit different than public art because it is has a historical component to it. But it came out of this engagement I had when I was selected to be one of the Boston artists in residence for the city. And so they have this very exciting and dynamic program in Boston where they task different artists to work with city agencies, right? And so in each year, the residency has a theme. And in my year, which was year 3, the theme was examining the city policies with a lens of resilience and racial equity. So that was the sort of charge that I and the other artists were given that year that we were artists in residence. So there was Nakia Hill, who's a nonfiction writer, Daniel Johnson, who's a poet, Marsha Paria, who is a choreographer, Farai Williams, who's a theater artist, Sneha Shrestha, who is a muralist, and Karen Young, who is a taiko drummer. So that was the cohort of artists who were engaged in this citywide residency project. So, and it was a city initiative. It wasn't anything we thought of on ourselves. We applied to be city artists in residence. We got the nod, and then we were engaging with the city with the city support. So I want to make it clear that this was a city initiative, how this work came about. Now, this is a landmark in Boston called Faneuil Hall. It's also known as the Cradle of Liberty. That's the nickname for it. It was built by Peter Faneuil, who was a trader, Trader, during the colonial period. And he built it as a place to sell his goods as a trader. He essentially needed a marketplace building. So he built it, right? And the building is named after him because he built it. And let me go back for a second. This one slide here, you can see Faneuil Hall, and you see that street Merchants Row that's kind of in the middle of the slide. That's what this text is referring to. So like, this is known history, right? This isn't something that I invented or that I dug up. Excuse me. This is known history about the city of Boston and the site of Faneuil Hall, that it was a network, a nexus in trade and exchange of goods. And some of those goods were people. That's a known thing. And this statement is from Peter Faneuil himself, knowing about the slave trade and requesting a particular type of slave, a particular breed of person, if you will. So this is the history of Faneuil Hall. And like I said, this is an open secret. Everybody knows it, but no one ever talks about it, right? And if you go to Faneuil Hall today, there's like, you know, it's a marketplace, there's different places to eat, there's restaurants, there's music venues, there's all sorts of stuff in that area, but there's no marker that indicates how that building came to be and what its financing was, right? Now, I'm a Boston artist in residence for the year, and my charge is to look at the city through the lens of resilience and racial equity, right? So when I look at this edifice, I think about that. And I thought that maybe we should talk about that as a city. And so what I did was I started thinking about that site and thinking about its relationship to enslavement, not just thinking about its relationship to commerce, which is its own conversation, but its relationship to enslavement. And so as an artist, I started to think about the shape of enslavement. What would that look like? And I thought very specifically about people being auctioned and made this sort of graphic element that represented the auction block, right? And I thought about it proportionally, an area for people to stand to sell and an area of people being sold. And thinking about those two rectangular forms coming together to become the site where human beings were transformed into property, right? So I started to work with historical organizations and historians to figure out specifically which vessels Peter Faneuil owned and where they picked up enslaved people and brought them to what was called then the New World, right? And doing all that research and all that mapping, and I was able to get to a point where I was able to make a representation of the slaving routes of Peter Faneuil's ships. And I was going to put that, make that into bronze and install it as a plate in front of Faneuil Hall and have it be at grade in the hardscape so people could walk on it. There's a long tradition of public art in Boston, of public memorial plates in Boston that are set into the hardscape, right? So it was in the existing metaphor of Boston architecture, right? But what I was going to do in addition was to heat the bronze plate to the temperature of a human body so it would be warm to the touch. So it would evoke the presence of people in the absence of actual images of people, right? So that's the sort of beginning of it. And that gives you the context of what I was trying to do within the confines of my residency as a Boston artist in residence. And in order to do something like that, you have to get approval. Now, I'm a Boston artist in residence, and I go through all the different departments of the city to get approval to do this. Because in order to propose a public art project in Boston, you have to have a public hearing. In order to get a public hearing, you have to get the approval of all these other different stakeholders in the project. So I'm just going through the process, basically, that has been set out for me to get a public artwork approved, right? I came up with a budget that was going to cost me about $300,000 to do this, right? Because I'm not trying to make any money off of it. $300,000 is the cost of actual producing the object, right? And I was able to get the city to agree to give me $150,000 towards building this memorial, right? Based on my proposal. I needed 300,000, they gave me 150. And that $150,000 they gave me was contingent on me raising another $150,000 on my own, right? So I ended up reaching out to all these different people in the city to get their approval. So I had to go to the Landmarks Commission. And then I had to go to the Property Management Department, which is the department that owns Faneuil Hall. I had to go to the mayor's office. I had to go to the Landmarks Commission and this is the Water and Sewer Commission, the Environment Department. I had to get the consent of the representative of the area, the legislative district in which Faneuil Hall sits. I had to go to the National Park Service. I had to get other historians and other artists to write letters of support. And with all of that, I still had to raise $150,000 to get the matching funds from the city, right? So I did a Kickstarter to raise money, right? And the Kickstarter funded in like 7 days, and I overfunded the goal. I tried to raise 30,000 and I ended up raising $48,000. And all of that happened. And then I got scheduled for a public hearing, and I was over the moon because I could finally go to the Boston City Council and present all of this stuff, all the letters of support, and all the sorts of research and the budget and everything I had done, and say, like, you know, here's the thing, and we did it the way that we were supposed to do it. We followed all the directions, right? So what ended up happening was the director of the Boston branch of the NAACP privately told a city employee that the NAACP in Boston opposed the project and that they would do everything they could to make sure that the project didn't happen because they didn't approve of it. And I have never spoken to the Boston branch of the NAACP for this entire time. When I was first got appointed as a Boston artist in residence in that year, I reached out to them by phone to introduce myself and say, like, you know, I'm an artist in residence for the city. You probably heard there's like a huge diverse group of people who are going to be artists in residence for the city, and I'm one of them. Never heard back from them. But then a week before my public hearing, they decided to publicly come out against the work. You know. And also there's a sort of individual in Boston who is a local gadfly, for lack of a better way to put it, who's very interested in getting the name of Faneuil Hall changed. And my proposal upset him. And he ended up starting a letter writing campaign against me and making all of these sorts of claims about my work that were not true. Those claims started to infiltrate different people's thinking, including the Boston branch of the NAACP. And he's part of the reason why they came out so strongly against the project before it even got to a public hearing. So I was in the middle of this conversation where people were angry at the mayor because he wasn't, quote, doing enough for Black people. The NAACP was mad because they weren't included in the conversation about what a memorial should be. I was told I wasn't a member of the community, that I was some outsider trying to build this memorial. And the work ended up getting lost. And I found that I couldn't get the conversation to go forward because people weren't interested in building a memorial. They were interested in having some say in the power dynamics of the city. And people kept saying, Kevin Peterson and the NAACP kept saying that the mayor had proposed this artwork as a way to not talk about the racial climate in the city. And I said, well, if that's the case, I'm just going to withdraw my work because I don't want to be in the way of anybody having a conversation about anything. And I called the city and I, withdrew the work. And then I wrote to all of my Kickstarter followers and told them that they could have their money back. To my surprise, none of them wanted their money back. I think 2 of them wanted their money back, which was very generous of them. And I was able to pay some of the people who had worked on the project with me to that point. And so I withdrew the project and I tried to move on, right? And I made it clear that I was willing to build it. I'm still willing to build it, but I can't be involved in this conversation that has nothing to do with my work and nothing to do with the goals of the project. So in the interest of moving on, I started to work with my crew to make a portable version of this memorial that can be anywhere on the East Coast. And this version is above ground. It's raised a little bit. It's still heated to the temperature of a human body, but all the systems are in that plinth underneath it, so it can be moved from place to place. So that's one of the ways I've started to move on and develop new work based on this project. This shape still continues to influence my work. And I started to make a series of paintings based on this auction block form. And using that form to start to interrogate ideas about space and figure and ground, but also to interrogate the history of modernism. Modernism is in America is the result of the wealth of this nation that was created by the labor of Black people. So the notion that Black people don't have an involvement in modernism is completely crazy. And I wanted to make work that centered the history of enslavement in this modernist idiom. And so these are the paintings that I've been working on that are very much related to Joseph Albert's Homage to the Square, which is an incredible, important body of work for me. But I wanted to reinvigorate that work and talk about the origins of modernism through this sort of iconic form that I designed. Thank you. And with that, I will turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Xu, for his presentation.
Again, thank you for inviting me to join this conversation. I'm happy to be here to share some ideas and stories behind my sculpture and the practice here. So for me, sculpture is about memory. The memory contains fragments from the past. It could be from my own memory or from others who share with me. A beautiful sculpture is like a strong memory. It's not about the shape anymore. It's energy. And the energy releases a feeling to remind us of something we used to believe. I learned how to make sculpture when I was in the college back 15 years ago, I think, in China, in a really traditional way. My teacher used to visit Paris when he was young. And after he came back, he was really into the modern architecture. And in his class, I remember he always emphasized making sculptures like building an architectural structure. So which I think what he said impact on me. So for me, I think sculpture is like a house. It should make people feel we can live inside of it. When I think about sculpture, I also think of gravity. The gravity creates a force that can easily make a heavy sculpture lose balance. I took this picture at the time when I first found Eve, an abandoned statue from Quyang, where I used to work there after graduate, before I came to US. There are massively marble production like Greek style statues are being made and shipped to like unknown places. Anywhere in the world needs an affordable price marble statue. It's really rare to see something like Eve, like the gravity. So I think it's really rare to find like Eve, something like Eve, the gravity can completely change in her path. So she kind of choose to stay, in the factory until I found her. Later, I found another sculpture, also got lost. It was a replica of Michelangelo's David. So I resculpted both sculptures and I made this piece. It's about the new story of this new skin. And that was in 2015. I think a year later, an LA-based nonprofit Equitable will train LD and Matt. They saw this piece and they invite me to do a potential show like in public, and we were making the sketch, looking for set in the Los Angeles area, and I think we found this place is on their way to a Chinese restaurant around Cascade Park, and we made several sketches and sent to the city council, and there was a hearing from this like they host a meeting to discuss this piece, and in the end the work was the proposal was rejected. And I did this short video. I mean, it's just a quick edit of the project. It's not the whole video.
Good evening. My name is Paul Perez. I've lived here in the city of Monterey Park since the early 60s. I moved here from Echo Park, Silver Lake area in Los Angeles because I fell in love with the city, the community, and I love the history of the city. Let me ask you a question. If he had the original painting of the well-known Mona Lisa and you have enjoyed it for 100 years as originally painted, would you allow someone to touch it or tell you that the Mona Lisa should be used to recruit more art students by adding something, even though it's artistic, to the painting? Maybe a Bugs Bunny or a Mickey Mouse to attract more art students? We all love Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse, but not on the Mona Lisa. Put it someplace else. Never will that, what's going to be next? Beware. I understand that with all due respect to the East LA College, my alma mater many, many years ago, is supporting the idea of installing another recent statue in our Cascade waterfalls to entice students to take more art classes. I love art, but not at whose expense? I'm asking that. If that is true, then why not place the new statue in front of the Vincent Price Art Building, or place it in front of the college, or in the median of a street that is the main entrance to the city? We thank you for not allowing the removal of the Athena as originally asked, and we're now sincerely asking, do not allow the installation of any other statue, even temporary, in our Cascade Park. The waterfall surrounding area was and is the origin of Monterey Park. Do not allow the modifications which can later be used as a stepping stone to something more devastating in the future, maybe a hotel. As a retired U.S. Marine Corps officer, I share with you some military strategy. Communist and fascist strategy is to get their foot in the door now with what may seem like a minor change to help people, and then comes a real intent. A major change which is to destroy history, pride, and harmony. He who ignores history is doomed to make the same mistakes again. Please stop the ball from rolling into the Cascades. Do not allow any change to our Cascade waterfall, whether it's modifications, additions, or deletions, even if it's temporary. I wonder how many of these East LA students are registered to vote. The present statue may not represent the ancient statue, but that's what was placed there originally. So I ask you, please do not approve this. And thank you very, very much.
As I think about this project, I think about the person that created the Cascades. Was this his vision, to put a statue in the waterfall? I don't know. Would he approve of it? That's hard to say. as I look at it, it's like white tamper with perfection. I think we should leave it the way it is. I don't see Peter Snyder's vision in the statue. That's why I'm against it. Thank you.
Everyone expressed not to touch the current Athena. Having studied under one of the foremost scholars in Greek goddesses at UCLA, the moment I looked at the statue, I knew immediately it wasn't Athena. She has no spear, she has no helmet, and instead it is the Roman goddess Flora, who has a floral band wrapped around her waist. This statue, for anyone who has seen it, you can just hit google.com on your phone right now and see the statue people are crying over isn't even Athena. I understand how important public parks and spaces are for our diverse communities. When hearing the opposition, it was clear the kind of racial tensions that exist in the SUV, which I've been witness to. I'm here today to say that there are many other people like myself.
Excuse me, ma'am, your 3 minutes.
Okay, in their teens, 20s, and 30s and beyond that think this is cool and fresh. I think
Good evening. My name is Sarah Chow. I am a third-generation Chinese Filipina American and a second-generation Angelino, as well as a member of the Asian Women's Art Collective, Asian Mamas Working in the Arts. My family lives in Monterey Park and the surrounding San Gabriel Valley area, and because of the Asian American community here, I grew up with the great privilege of the richness of our cultural traditions here. I am a working visual artist with a Bachelor of Arts in studio art, and I was engaged in the visual arts from a very young age. As a young, creative Asian American, I was constantly looking for representation of people like me, women, Asian faces, and while rare, it was thrilling, validating, and eminently hopeful for me to find representation of Asian Americans in my city and in concrete and real works of art. I'm an artist today because of moments like these. I grew up regularly enjoying public parks here, and I understand that public parks are for the people in the community. I believe that a work by a Chinese artist with a Chinese subject will have a positive impact on our park and in the community.
Do I have a second?
Okay, that's your full motion. And is there a second on? I'll second it. Please vote.
Votes unanimous, motion carries.
Well, again, I want to thank all the speakers, everybody that came forward. And with that, let's take a 10-minute break.
So in the end, Eve didn't get a chance to visit Monterey Park City, but later the museum and the exhibit chains, they were thinking to respond to the whole the event. So they asked me to continue work with them, and I said I'd like to produce Athena, because what they talking is they try to keep their Athena in the niche, but actually after my research, I didn't really find a real Athena statue in the whole story. So after 3 months like producing it and 2 months waiting on the transportation, I made this as Untitled Athena, and this is the installation view from the exhibition at the Vincent Price Art Museum in 2018. So, and when I was making this Athena, Untitled Athena, I was inspired from the story after I watched the video, many the resource and research from there's the 3 Athena get involved in this story. The first one actually is from Peter Snyder, the Athena. He put his Athena, and he was a developer, also a person who designed the Cascade Park, and he was the Great Descent. And in the 1920s, he promised to build affordable and comfortable housing for the middle class community. And also, he put a statue and gave the name Athena. But when I was getting close to see the statue, I realized actually it was a Venus statue. So in my Untitled Athena, I kept the arm poster and the water jar from the Venus. The second Athena I got inspired was from the this picture is from the 1940s when the project was failed. So somebody, the sculpture, the statue was removed until today, and I can't really find any resource to tell where the sculpture is now. And the second sculpture, actually, I found really inspired me was this Hope Athena, which belonged to the Lacama Museum. It's a permanent collection called Hope Athena. It's donated by the Hope family in the 1940s, and I think this is the earliest originally Athena I have found from Rome in the history in Los Angeles, and so I try to study on it and keep the feature of the body, like on the Untitled Athena you can see the same almost clothes, dress, and helmet and armors, and also the Medusa in front of her chest. The third Athena, which is current Athena in the niche at Cascade Park, she was produced in the same area as the Eve, and actually belonged to a series called Four Season Goddess Garden Statues, which were successfully sold all over the world. And this picture I took from the where I produced my sculpture. There was a exhibition room, showroom in the factory, in most of factory. Different style, but most of them like for the garden. So the Cascade Park Athena was put in a niche in 2003 as a donation piece to the park. And the park used to belong to the Peter Snyder's family until 1999, when the city of Monterey Park, they bought it from them, but not include the sculpture. So so it's an empty niche when they bought the park. So for me, it's sculptures really, in the end, these monuments is really about to finding a position to fill the gap in between this gravity invisible force in everyone's heart, in mind, and the memory from the history, even include of each sculptures, like their own story. So I also keep there's a motto from the Monterey Park City, pride in the past, faith in the future, as a part of the sculpture. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, it's Ken Lum here. I'm going to be moderating the panel. Both stories are complicated in a way. Of course, they deal with race and so on, but they are also complicated. I guess my first question to Steve is if I was to read it as purely about territoriality of, like you have these different interest groups and they feel aggrieved because of small politics, local politics involved. Is that a fair reading or not?
I think that's fair, Ken. I think that there's an agenda that, it's not like I was a secret agent trying to do something underhanded. It was a Boston Art Commission project. The artists were all announced in January. So if the NAACP was interested in art, they could have had a conversation with me all along. But because the work was able to be leveraged in a way that, made them seem like they were relevant to a discourse in Boston, that's what that was about. I don't think they really cared about the work itself.
Right, but I guess my point is that if that's the case, then it's not really about anti-Blackness from NAACP, but it's more about their pettiness in terms of their insistence on claiming political territory.
Well, they're sort of claiming Blackness as a territory. Right. When they tell me that I'm not a member of my own community, like that's textbook anti-Blackness. That's, you're an outsider, you're not welcome here. There's a way in which people think that people want to believe that Boston is the land of freedom and opportunity. They want to believe that. And Black people, there's a species of Black people in Boston who really don't want to believe that there was enslavement. Mm. And so if you start talking about that, people have a tendency to get upset.
And Shu, I guess I have a question in terms of what lessons do you draw from just having to vet your work through politics, because in a way it was an exercise in democracy, right? And maybe too much, right? Because that brings in all kinds of people who, they just want to show up at City Hall and be on TV, on cable TV, right? And
yeah,
go ahead. Yeah,
I think the politics or political term is just the environment. It's a surrounding. So I didn't need to talk about it. Just you can feel it. As I said, it's a gravity. So this gravity, this invisible force, were everywhere. They force you to accept, and I was invisible, and that's the reason I think to show the bodies, like from the memory, it's very urgent to myself to kind of express a kind of existence. Yeah.
Right. I guess just playing devil's advocate a little bit, the former Marine, right, who made an argument against.
Yeah, that's pretty strong one. Yes,
right, a very strong one, right? So let me just play the devil's advocate there. Obviously, I'm not in truth sympathetic, but I'm going to play this opposing position where maybe, people can be attached to things even if the original Athena was not the original Athena. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, it was stolen. It disappeared for decades, and people become attached to it only because they don't want to see change, right?
Or they don't want to see the truth,
right?
Or they don't want to know the truth. They're afraid of to know the truth, or they want to do they still think everything is an exchange.
Right.
So I think that's the
right. And so I guess that was a setup to my question. Then how do you negotiate that with the processes of civic government, where you have to air everything out in public, and you invite members of the public at large to come in and express their opinions, and then you have to collect the and think about what the members of the public have contributed in terms of their opinion, right? Because you have politicians sitting on the council, and they are also thinking about their own political life. So how do you negotiate the two?
Ali and Matt, who from Equitable, they are the main person to finish this process of negotiation. I think it's very important to keep identity as artists. I was that period we were talking I was talking with them because the role they play in this case is complicated. So they are in the middle to finish. To finish the project we together. So it's in a way it's like collective, and we rely on each other. And she and Matt, they know what I need or what I want, and also they forcing, because their role is in public, because they try to finding a way to present art, and that's how we separate the process during the making, the pushing this proposal.
Okay, thank you, Stu. I have the same question for you, Steve. How do you negotiate that gap between the political process that's in place and your ambitions, the truth that you wanted to convey?
I think the hard thing, Ken, is people want to be entertained. And I think that when you talk about public art, when you talk about art in general, people think, oh, it's good for kids, it's entertaining, it's colorful, and then we can have a food truck and people can come and we can have a concert, and it has that aspect to it. And a real critical discussion of what something like Xu or something like I am doing is lost on people, not because they're not able to understand it, but because all of culture has been delivered to them at such a low level that when something actually as art is delivered to them, they don't know what to do with it, and they have this sort of glandular response to it instead of thinking. The German word for monument is Denkmal, which means thought object. I'm not making work for people to go oh, that's nice, let's have some popcorn. A public memorial is an indictment. It is to say that this happened here and we shall not forget it. And that kind of gesture is not entertaining, and that is what is very hard for people to understand. I also think, Ken, that in municipalities have a fear of art because it goes back to, Mapplethorpe and the NEA 4. And this, especially in America, this sort of terror that someone is going to show some art and someone's going to get offended and it's going to be a problem. Instead of saying yeah, you're offended, let's talk about why you're offended. Let's have that conversation. That people seem to think that their feelings, that art begins and ends with their feelings or their taste. It has nothing to do with that stuff.
No, but I guess, Steve and Xu, people don't have the tools to deal with art. They don't have the.
I'm going to push back on that and say, you know what? It's sort of incumbent on us as artists to have those conversations. I'm willing.
No, I agree with you. I'm
willing to have those conversations.
Art is a language, like it need to be translated
Yeah.
by the artist, the design. That's how artists have to work hard to avoid having like some kind of gap. That's what I said. The gravity will take the objects, like lose the balance. So you have to use everything you can do to finding a way. Like I talked with Steve like previously, like, oh, art actually the end. There never be an end of art practice. You think the project's end, but it's at least a beginning, a new start. Like you can continue to make the drawing because the sign, the shape deeply get into your mind, and you believe there's meaning, and you finding a new position to balance it, and then to translate, and constantly showing frequently, to use it as your materials. I think that's the sensibility we through the practice we had. Yeah.
Right. I mean, by the way, I work in the public domain, and I have a work that was also rejected for not dissimilar reasons, which I find totally offensive, as the decision to withdraw something after I had signed a contract and so on. But I guess I was just making the point that it's a very tall order, especially in the American context, where people are, like, as Steve alluded to, are kind of kept dumb in terms of the value of art, kept dumb in terms of to think critically and to fear change and to fear
to be changed.
Yeah.
And also the contempt that they have for visual artists, like somehow that the artist is messing with you, or that the artist is trying to like hurt you in some way. And that the notion that the artist is actually trying to like improve culture, is actually having a cultural dialogue with you. I think that Tilted Arc with Richard Serra all those years ago has still scarred people about public art, and the kind of hearing that Xu had to go through with people saying those kinds of things to him. Like, how come no one in that hearing stood up and said, that's disgusting? Like, what you're saying right now is disgusting. And that's the problem.
Although different qualitatively, because it didn't deal with race, it didn't deal with historical recovery and of the truth and so on and that.
Right.
And I guess I have one. There's quite a few questions in the chat, but I'd like to ask one final question I have for both of you is, what would you do differently if you had to do it over again? If you knew this was the outcome, what would you alter? Like, would you do this over again if you know in hindsight, given the advantage?
I would do it again, like I would, because I believe in the work. Like that's the first thing. I would definitely do it again.
But what sort of procedural differences would there be, I guess?
I think, Ken, I really think that I would have gotten a better publicist. I would have hired someone to actually negotiate that conversation better than I could. Because I clearly was, I got blindsided by these people who are not very bright, but they have computers, and they were able to generate tremendous press releases in fervor.
But I think in your case, Steve, it seems to me the mayor's office, it behooved the mayor's office to have had the political insight to contact the NAACP as well, no?
Well, I think so too. I think that, the mayor and the NAACP acted the way that they did because they knew that they would put the mayor in a very difficult position. The mayor of Boston cannot come out against the largest, oldest civil rights group in the country. They can't do that, right? And that's—
I had a really similar experience. The mayor, yes. The mayor actually, I didn't add it because it's considered the longest of the video. Actually, the mayor gave the speech in the end, talk about art, public art, and it's matched everything I learned from school, but it's totally not for the reality. So, you can use whatever she described on art, on anything you see as entertainment objects. So art, it is in a level, it is entertainment, but how we translate, how we keep pushing it, how we all be together to find a way to prove maybe there alternative way. Maybe you maybe you're wrong. So, and if I have another chance, I still will do it. Yeah, I think the reason I give the title for the exhibition as the Garden of Seasons, because I want to create a like a patient place, like people can can slow down. I think the only thing can answer the question is from the time. As long as the time pass, some answer will come to us, not like we're going to immediately to answer some or to say express ourselves. I think the beautiful part of the and monument or sculpture is it can tell you something you never find before. So it keeps telling through time, and it doesn't. As I said, the sculpture, the skin constantly changing because it's in public. It's just.
No, I agree with you, Sue. I think your work, your proposal, if it was realized, would have paid an incredible homage to the history of Cascade Park.
Right, the history of California.
Much more, it would have enriched. If I lived in Monterey Park and walked past that after I saw your piece, and even after it came down, I would be thinking about the multi-tiered histories of that park. But one question I do have for you, Sue, is Monterey Park is, as you know, basically an epicenter of Chinese population right now. It's incredible.
Yes, that's the question. That's the question. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I guess my question, didn't the politicians there do you think they actually configured that into their political thinking? Like, wow, we have a pretty large political constituency of Chinese Americans here, and so we better pay attention to them.
Of course, they know everything. That's why I said the politician, they only cares about is their power,
right.
Their power dynamic. Even though they knows they thought I'm just making fun on their sensitive topic or something. Most of them they were rich. They owns everything. Some officers just suggest me, if you don't put it in the park, I own the shopping mall. So I always support musicians. So they treat me like I'm a street artist. And okay, so what about you can show it in my restaurant? And I said, so I'm going to change the Eve back to the garden sculpture again. I fight so hard to to prove maybe there's a way to change the system, but they just want you accept it. As I said, there's an invisible force, and by language, it's just so abstract. And we artists, we play the materials, we will not play the words. They want to put you, they want to put you into that circle, so you have no place to hide.
Right.
So I think I visit Monterey Park City for maybe 5-6 times before to produce the Athena. I think the community still really dynamic, and yes, it's the largest city in the 80s about China, the immigrant from China, but before it was from Taiwan. It is really complicated history, issues, but just nobody cares. Like Steve, go into details, people don't care. If you want to talk about details, talk about what the truth it is, people don't care. People still want to think about what they need. So that's why I think finding a position for a new sculpture, it is for making agreement or make everybody happy. So it's like a mural. So you can see themselves. It's they can mirror, they can see themselves through the reflection. That is a really abstract. That part get involved with our skill, like what we, we do through our practice. So Athena came from that point. I realized that, I can't represent myself. There's no place for our artists talk about such heavy, issues in the history. There's only a place for artists who can serve, a dish as a chef. That's right. How to make people happy. So I like the way when Matt and Ali from Activable, they were really honest. They said, Shu, the reason we found this spot because we like Chinese food. So we used to drive there to eat food. So we saw this, we're curious because Matt also he's artist, so he has really great sensibility to to think about my sculpture Eve and the garden sculpture Flora. And he suggests, oh, Xu, do you think this is a potential place? And then I research, because from my experience, I can see the details from everything. Oh, this is from the town, I used to work there. So, and then that's how the narrative, getting connect one by one. So it's true, I can't make the projects by myself. There's many people who get involved. And I was just, to make the, kind of an image for the, and, for the post, for ending, for break. The arguments, the discussion still will be going on, in the air.
Thank you. I'm going to go to some questions. We have quite a few questions. One of them is, both of your work reveals strong and almost abiding connection to art history. Xu to the Western classical traditions in which you were schooled, ironically in China, a little more complicated than that, and Steve to modernism, and yet you both subvert those traditions in your work. Yet again, how do you think these subversions are understood and translated in a public context?
I don't know if it's so much subversion as it is, it's more like a syncretism. It's much more like a mutation. You know what I mean? It's like, this is my DNA. It's not, I'm part of modernist history, right? And so you have jazz, which is modern, right? And it's very much in an American idiom. And it's not like I'm taking Albers and like taking something that's not mine and altering it. No, it is mine. It's part of my own DNA. I think that's the thing about.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think this question may have to do with the fact that the public may not have any understanding of this.
I have to push back on that, Ken. We're literalists most of our lives, like Michael Fried said. Like, you have people understand the way they move through the world, through shopping malls, through cars, all that sort of stuff. An artist did all that stuff. An artist designed your entire life. You would have no self-perception. People would have no concept of themselves without photography, without hair, without makeup. All those people are artists, right? And so the notion that somehow modernism is beyond people, like, where do you go to work?
Right. No, I guess my experience is that, people are very afraid of art. They feel a little bit alienated from art, many people, not all. And then when you just even say, well, why don't you just start by describing it, something as simple as that, they start describing it, and very quickly they start understanding art, right? So the tripwire is very, very thin, I'm saying, but people don't want to trip over that wire. That's what I'm saying. They're taught to stay within this one side.
Well, I think that there's a notion of what is expertise and what is taste, right? And in America, we don't have a high culture. We have popular culture. We never had art for kings and popes and stuff like that. So the exciting stuff that, like when the Marine is talking about Mickey Mouse, that's like a huge achievement in American art. That's a gigantic achievement, right? And it's very, very different. So when people forget that when they talk about art, they're just talking about themselves. They're not talking about anything other than their own experience. And to allow people to have that experience. If you like it, that's fine. If you don't like it, that's fine too. But it's not about your personal taste. And that's the crux of the issue. People think that this is about taste or attitude or something. It's not. It's about culture. It's about the world we live in. Right?
And what do you think about that, Xu?
It's very complex. So it's complex question, and also I agree with I can feel the the emotion from the answer from Steve, which is pretty similar like mine. So I think entertainment or consuming life definitely changed the way how we perceive art, and like, does it still meaningful to keep making art, or put yourself in a position always having a contradiction argument, or what you believe, what you don't believe, and the times outside go so fast, how we balance it. So I don't know. So I think if me, I still will choose to, you know, keep working like this way, because I like the way be natural, you know, to use the materials to touch, to translate. And even though it's just for a few of people, you know, and I think it's not for now. And as I said, so just be patient, and this, you know, and you know, we talk about China. And there's, I mean, one went to park. I mean, it's a replica. So Steve talk about, you know, the authorship, but you know, somehow people don't really care, you know.
Yeah, no
and
one cares.
I think Henry Moore was the very, you know, few you know, the public sculptor we still talk, you know, talk quite often. But now, who is the public sculptor, you know, like really for the public, not for the white cube or white space like galleries, you know. So it's really hard to identify, you know, those concept. So who going to help, you know, to let the audience to understand, you know, Regento really, you know, you know, in an interesting way, you know.
Right.
I don't see that much, you know, in the current moments, but maybe in future. So, but there are possibilities. People should keep, you know, finding alternative way to keep you know, making interesting art, or for the public. You know, it shouldn't be a term like art for public or public art. You know, you know, all of art could be, you know, only by technical way. You know, we have to consider the lies, you know, some kind of damage in public. You know, the materials. Otherwise, you know, the art could be for public, for, you know, anytime, anywhere.
There's a question here by Cece Wu and Taro Matsushio, and well, they asked 4 questions, so but I'm just going to pick 1 or 2. Considering the bureaucratic process that both of you confronted, what kind of agency can an artist really have when they make public art?
It's very hard because it depends on what you want to get built. If you want to get something built that is going to be sort of blank and able to be quote unquote enjoyed, sort of like what you were saying, then you're going to have an easier time of it. That's just the fact. You know, if you're trying to make something that is critical, it's just going to be harder. And I think that is that's the water we swim in. What Xu said about gravity is so true. And I just want to go back to this thing about like education, and people don't, it's not that far a leap for people to go. Like if they just have the tiniest little bit of thing that brings them back to themselves, like when Xu was talking about the surface of something, like look at this through your phone. It's amazing. Like this sort of moment that the art actually starts to belong to the person, independent of what Xu thinks or what I think or whatever. That's the miracle. That's what we have. That's what artists do, is they do these things with material and people engage them, and suddenly you're more alive than you've ever been in your life, right? That's the thing. And I think that is, it takes a lot of training to be able to do that to a material. It's very hard to do. And so the goal is in civic life is to have the artist be part of civic life. So we can actually say to people in political situations, look, I'm the artist. And when we think about aesthetics and the way objects interact with public space, I'm the person who understands that, right? Instead of the artist being this person, like Xu was saying, who comes in to like, you know, decorate something or entertain you or something. No, I'm the person who understands your body in public space. That's who I am. What if a choreographer decides to help with the transportation department? What if a choreographer has something to do with how people get on and off trains, right? Something very, very simple, right? But that person understands your body in a way that no other person ever could. And why that person, why that artist isn't a part of civic life, that's the crux of the problem.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Okay. They asked another good question, which is, what kind of public art and monuments speak to you, and why?
What kind of public monuments speak to me?
What kind of public art and monuments? Let's just say public art speaks to you, each of you, and why?
I'm not that crazy about public art for the most part. I love Xu's work. I love that. I thought that was brilliant. Monuments to me are about indictment. So they're about history, right? The public art that I really respond to is mostly something like Maya Lin that makes you pay attention to the landscape, that alters your relationship to the landscape, or you know, even going all the way back to someone like Smithson, Robert Smithson, where you understand the beauty of the urban environment and things like that. But monuments are hard because there's not that many, I hate to say it, there's not that many good contemporary monuments. Horst Hoheisel comes to mind, who's very, very important to me personally. Christoph Wodisco, and you, Ken, you know, I think it's a very difficult business to be in, to be a custodian of public memory. It's very hard work. So that's why some of the monuments that are built very quickly after a happening end up becoming very sort of kitsch and difficult to deal with. But the ones, you know, usually you build a monument when people are starting to forget. That's when you usually come in and build something. And those are usually the best monuments in my estimation.
Yeah, and for you, Sue?
I think monuments for me, it's not about the shape. It's just a feeling, you know, like it's a feeling of empathy. So this empathy feeling, like, welcome me. Like I feel like I can live inside. So it's a structure. Yeah. It's, as I said, it's like architecture. Mm-hmm. And it's a feeling like, you know, energy. So I feel like when I feel like exalted, when I feel like tired, or when I feel so excited, I have some place I can go inside, like my soul, you know, I can feel myself, like it's like a mural.
It's embodying. You said
enclosed, but it's in a way it's open. It's open to you. So I think that's something I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, in public.
Body open to other bodies and so on.
Yeah.
Right. There's another question here by John Tain. He says, thank you. And then he says that he notes that both of you made portable versions after the decline of the original project, and was wondering if you could share your thoughts about what changes in making these works portable from the original.
I think in my case with Auction Block, it made me realize that marrying the work to the site of Faneuil Hall was only the beginning, right? And that thinking that it could be anywhere, or thinking about the expanse of the situation, allowed me to think about the form differently. Like what happens if you can't walk on it? What happens if you can lay on top of it? What happens if it protects you from the weather? So those kinds of things are the things that started to come into my mind once I decided, how do I make this portable? So it became a problem to solve, but it also opened up all these different other kind of aesthetic possibilities that got really, really exciting.
Mm-hmm. And Sue?
I mean, it's portable. Sorry, it was portable. I was a little bit cut off. What's portable? What's the question?
For example, both you and Steve, you made the work anew, but for they were more mobile. They were within the museum, or they're a portable entity from the original, right? Because you were defined in the original. And so John Tain asked, what changed in the transition from the original project to one you exhibited in the Vincent Price Museum?
I think it's the context. So we're facing different process. So in the museum, it's a, we talk about art industrial, it's just different context. And also, yeah, I think we have to prepare different, the way to handle, to find the gravity. So the different word. So we can't keep one gesture, so we're easy to lose it,
Sure. Here's another question. How do you both see your public works in relationship to time? How do you envision the future of your public art?
I want people to forget about me and to remember the thing, like to remember the thing, that the object. I don't want the focus to be on me. I want the focus to be on the moment that I'm trying to memorialize. And so many monuments, so many bits of public art, we keep talking about the artist, and I've never been interested in that in public work. I've never, like, my public work is always pointing toward something else. It's not pointing at me. And those, I think, are the ones that endure. Like, people still talk about the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, even though some people don't even know who made that, right? And that's the beauty of the work. And by the same token, there's other monuments where people are always talking about the designer, and they're not talking about the thing that the object is supposed to be pointing towards, right? And to me, I think that's a failure.
Well, the interesting thing about you know this, Steve, the Maya Lin Vietnam Veterans Memorial, is that many of the Vietnam soldiers, American soldiers, disliked the work at first. In fact, they disliked it even more because it was an Asian woman who never set foot in battle, who never wore fatigues, and who never interviewed any of the so-called vested interests.
Right, and she's from Ohio.
Right, but over time, and Lynn herself, her aunt, I think, was one of the great architects of modern China. But anyways, but over time, they came to, that work came to be loved, right? Which is not the case in your case, because you were not even given the chance to have the advantage of time, creating a kind of familiarity and perhaps ultimately an affection for your interventions.
Right. It's to me, it sort of turns into something like Jodorowsky's version of Dune, something that never got made, but everybody talks about, which kind of breaks my heart. Like I said to Ferenc before we were having this talk, it's very hard for me to talk about this project because it was so close to me, and to not have it built is very painful personally for me. But I also know the importance of this kind of failure, this kind of public failure, because in Xu's case, in my case, in your case, Ken, in the case of like Fred Wilson and all the other sort of artists who've come up to situations like this, it moves the discourse further. It moves this conversation further.
One last question, because we have to wrap up. Monuments, permanent, is that a good thing, or should we really move to provisional monuments, temporary and other forms, even non-material forms? We are in a monuments moment, as you know, so.
Well, there's in ancient Rome, those things were melted down all the time. So somebody would come along, knock down a statue, melt it down, and make cannonballs out of it. So I'm all for things changing. I'm all for a reassessment of things that are in the public sphere. But it's always interesting to me that people get very upset about statuary, but they don't get upset about like glut of unsolicited advertising that they encounter every day.
Yeah, figurative thing.
What's your thought on that question, Sue, in terms of the durability of monuments at this moment?
I think, it's monument dissolved by itself, by time. So it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter who. I mean, if you want to unite it to take down, a statue, that's a public activity. That's right. So I think the art, I mean the public sculpture art has their own life. We should let it that time to tell us.
I see Fear and Dot back on, which is basically like the hook on the old.
You keep talking. I know, like Xu is probably out of coffee by now. Do you have any coffee?
Thank you very much, Steve Locke and Wong Shu.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much to all of you. And I really would like also to quote, actually, at one point, Xu said, "Does it still meaningful to making art?" And you answered yourself, "Yes, I think we will keep making, keep working." I want to thank you all, Steve, Xu, and Ken Lum for tonight's, and also for sharing this very touching experience and personal stories, and having these really complicated, to talk about these complicated issues and have these difficult conversations. And also thank you, Ken, for facilitating this whole discussion. And I also would like to thank our audiences being so engaging and asking so many great questions tonight. So we apologize if we didn't get to your question yet, and we will circulate your questions and also your contact information to all of our speakers tonight. And they will be able to follow up with you directly if they are able to. So otherwise, thank you so much for joining us tonight again. And we will be posting this video recording on our website in the next few days. And please feel free to share with your friends and your colleagues, and if they're not able to turn in tonight. And we hope to see you again at our next online event. And until then, have a wonderful evening tonight. Bye.
Xu, I'm coming to Beijing, baby.
Yes, coming to find you.